Hello, welcome to day 5 of 100 days of growth. Today we are going to be looking at data types in programming, but we are going to narrow down to JavaScript. But it's something that applies across all of programming because it's a fundamental knowledge that every programming language uses. So, what are data types? Think of data types like the identification of items. So we can have, for instance, we have colors, but not all colors are the same. We have white, we have black, we have red, and the way you use black would not be the way you use white. Why? Because they're entirely different colors. So that's exactly the same logic around data types. Data types have to do with the different type of data we pass to our system, how the computer handles them, how they communicate information. Now one of the major understanding you need to have about data types is that data types is how we convey data, right? So it could be a user's information, it could be their profile, it could be their verification data, it could be a list of items or objects. So those are practical examples of why we use data and data types. For instance, on Facebook application, when you create your account, that is data. When you create a post, it goes to the database and is stored as data. When you fetch new posts, whenever you refresh and then new posts pops up on your feed, that is on your feed rather, that is also data. So these different data types determine how data is stored, how data is passed across the system, how data is handled. So I'm going to show you a practical example. I already created my index.js and I linked it to my HTML file. Let me run this live so we can see. Okay, now for my index.js, I'm going to create a variable const sum, and then I'm going to try to add the number 5 plus 5. And if we see what this gives us, it should give us 55, right? Even though this may not have been the intention, but this is what it gives us. So your intention may be, oh, I want to sum up both 5 and 5 the number and 5 the string to get 10. But because JavaScript has the way it behaves with data types and you need to understand, I just wanted to show you that when you do not understand data types in this sense, you're going to make a big mess of your system. So let's jump right into the different data types that we have. Number one, we have strings. Strings in JavaScript are basically text with quotes. So it could be single quotes, it could be double quotes. So we can have single quotes, or double quotes, right? Either of them passes. So if we do this, but if I save this now on my system, these single quotes, let me increase this a little so it's bolder. I notice that most of my videos have not really been bold enough. So if I save this on my system now, the single quote is going to disappear. Why? Because I'm using prettier, and my default settings for prettier is to use double quotes. So if I save it now, my single quote is gone, but you can actually use single quotes and it works. Another thing that we can also do with strings is we can use template literals for concatenation. So initially, if you wanted to add items in JavaScript, you do say, let's say greeting, and then you say hello. Let's create a my name variable here. My name equal to the Joshua. So initially you say hello plus, you give space, and then you say plus my name. Why? Because you wanted to add two items together, right? So this is the of old pattern of adding strings, of concatenating adding strings together. But the new pattern is to use backticks, right? So you see const, we already have my name, so we say new greeting, equal to new greeting equal to hello. Hello, and we use what we call template literals. So template literals is dollar sign attached to open and close curly brackets. So here we can now pass in my name, and that's all, right? If we try to console log, greeting, then we console log new greeting, you should now see that we get hello in Joshua, hello in Joshua. So notice the difference between template literals and the old pattern. The old pattern, you needed to add, spacing yourself. If we take away this spacing, you see that if you take away this spacing, you see that that space is gone. Hello, it closes. Hello in Joshua. By the way, I just realized now I'm going to say something when we get into number. If you notice, we added a plus here. It did not throw an error. When we get to numbers, I'm going to show you how we can use this. So, but for now, let's continue. So yes, so under template literals, we didn't have to add. So let's add the space back here, and then let's continue. Under template literals, we did not have to add spacing. We did not have to add a special space. Template literal just displays it as it is, right? So if we add the spacing here, it automatically gives us the space, and it's cleaner, it's neater, and it's much more modern. So always go with template literals for your strings. The next type we're going to get into is numbers. So we can say const age equal to 30. We can do height, yes. So we can do height equal to 4.9, which is a decimal. We can do percent, which is 10. You can say 10%. We can also do negative number, yes, which is -5, right? So this is numbers, and for numbers we can sum up numbers. We can do sum of numbers. Sum of numbers equal to yes, we can do this, and then we can get the sum of numbers, right? So you see 39.9. Now I said I wanted to show us something when we get to numbers. We can also do const string numbers, right, equal to 100. Now if we try to sum up, so when we come here and we say new sum equal to um sum of numbers plus string numbers, this is not going to work. It is going to give us, okay, let's console log it. So let's console log new sum. If we console log new sum, you see we get 39.900, right? So the 100 was not actually added to the number, it was added as a string, and automatically this becomes a string. If you notice the coloring here, this is white. All strings are console logged here as white, notice them, but numbers are console logged as purple. Let me also increase this space so it's more legible. So if you notice, because we added a string to a number, it automatically changed the type. Always take note of that. But what we can do is to add a plus sign here. Now let's see what happens when we add a plus sign. When we added a plus sign, it still came out as a number. So a plus sign is a very fast way to convert strings to numbers. Now this is something that it comes in very handy, because most times, especially when you work with certain types of database, you might store number variables as strings. So it's always important to know and have a good understanding of it, which is where the advantage of having typed languages like TypeScript and comes in. With TypeScript, you can easily know, okay, this is a type of string, and if I even try to do this with TypeScript, I'm going to get an error, right? It's going to tell you cannot add string and numbers together. Why? Because they are not of the same type. So you have to pass in a plus or you have to either do a direct number conversion. So that's it for numbers. Another type of data we can look at is booleans. For booleans, we have just is true and is false, right? So it's either is true or is false. If we console log this, you see we have true or false, and they would either evaluate to 1 or 0. So if we console log, it will either evaluate to 1 or 0, right? So true is always 1, 0 is false is always 0. That's something you should always have at the back of mind. So if we do an if true, this would always run, right? If we do an if false, this would not run. Why? Because it's just uh, it's that's the way it works. So that's it with booleans. The next type we have is null. This is where most people have issues. Null versus undefined. So most people have a good understanding of strings, numbers, booleans, but when it comes to null, they kind of have issues. Now, the difference between null and undefined is quite clear or quite simple. Now, let me show you. So let's undefined variable and console log undefined variable. So if we console log undefined variable, you see we get undefined. Now, undefined is undefined by default, which means it was not given a value, or on runtime it was not assigned a value. So there are two ways to run into an undefined scenario. One, it's either when it was created it was not initialized with a value, or two, on runtime it was not assigned a value also. Now these are like two very um practical analogies to uh, hit the undefined examples. But for null is intentional. This is null is to intentionally declare it as null, right? So you see, null is to pass in the null variable. So maybe for instance, you expect a value. For instance, when you use const, because with const you cannot just create a variable like this is not going to work. Why? Because const would not allow you need to assign a value to it. So with const, if you do not have a value in mind to assign on initial declaration or creation, what you can do is that you can pass a null to it. So now that's where null comes in handy. You use it for instances like when you're working with database. Maybe you have a value in the database that expects a value, a data in the database that expects a value but does not have a value yet. It's practically used for objects. You can assign it to an object. We're going to look at objects shortly. Now this is where it comes in very handy. So never forget, undefined is that a value does not have a value. It was not given a value, but it has been instantiated. Null is to intentionally declare it as null. Now let's move on to arrays. Arrays are lists. So we have const list. It could be a list of numbers, a list of strings, another string, another string. It could also be a list of boolean, boolean, true, false. It could be a list of null. It could be a list of undefined, right? So basically, arrays are items that can take in any value, right? Any data types. And the way we access arrays is by using the array index. So array counts from 0, not 1. So this is index 0, this is index 1, this is index 2, this is index 3, 4, and it continues like that. So if we say list, if we try accessing list 1, it is going to give us 2, right? Why? Because it starts counting from 0. So if we view this in our console, it gives us 2. Basically, that's how it works. We also have objects. Now, object is a combination of key value pairs. Think of object as a list, but not just the random kind of list you have in arrays. Think of object as lists that have key and value pairs. So we have const user equal to, so a typical user in Facebook can have a first name. So a first name, we say Inedu. You can have a last name, we'll say Joshua. You can have an age, you can have an is active, you can have an occupation. Yes, so this is a practical example where we can use null. So when we are creating the user, most likely, okay, so when the user tries to skip that profile page, maybe if it was not compulsory and it was skippable, and then once he clicks the skip, he can skip it. Null, automatically it gets assigned to what? Null, which means he can come back and reassign it with another value next time. So this is a practical use case for null. And then for objects, you can access the objects using user just directly, and then it gives you everything. But if you want to access a particular item inside the object, you use what we call the dot notation, dot first name, and then it gives you the first name. We can also use the okay, let's just stick with this. Let's just use the dot notation, and we are good to go in Edu. So this is it for the data types, the common data types you are going to meet in programming language. A few other programming language have, for instance, TypeScript have some other types, especially because it is a type language. So those are some other like deeper types, but basically and foundationally, these are some of the most common data types you are going to be working with across all programming languages. We have strings, we have numbers, we have booleans, we have null that's undefined, we have arrays, and we have objects. So that is it, and we've come to the end of today's episode. I believe you learned something. If you've not followed me yet, do well to give a follow, subscribe to my channel, turn on your notifications so that you can always get notified whenever I post new videos. And don't forget, if you learned something, drop it in the comments, and do well to share this video with your friends. Thank you for joining me today. See you tomorrow. Bye.